Hi everyone, my name is Beth. I'm a librarian at the Weinberg Library in Mequon, and today is May 11th, which would normally mean that we'd be having our second meeting of the Slice and Share Cooking Club. But once again, since we can't do it in person, I'm bringing it to you virtually. The theme for this month was fruit desserts, so I am going to show you how to make Blackberry Cobbler. This is a recipe that I adapted from the America's Test Kitchen recipe for blueberry cobbler. It was very difficult. I just swapped out the blueberries for blackberries. I know, it's pretty intense. And the recipe is linked in the description below. So, this recipe happens in stages. First thing I need to do is put together my fruit filling, and then I will put together some drop biscuits that we'll put on top of the filling once it's been baked for a few minutes. I'm also going to put together a cinnamon sugar that we will sprinkle on the biscuits so they get nice and golden brown and cinnamony. I'm going to put together my filling first, and for that I need 1/3 cup of sugar. Now the recipe technically calls for 1/2 cup, but again, remember I adapted this from blueberry cobbler. Depending on how tart your blackberries are, you may need more, you may need less, depending on what kind of flavor you're looking for. My blackberries are not very tart, and I don't want this to get sickly sweet, so I'm only doing 1/3 cup this time. Then in this bowl I have a tablespoon of cornstarch, a pinch of ground cinnamon, and a pinch of table salt. And I'm going to mix this together so that it's nicely combined as much as I can with the cornstarch. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to add my blackberries, and these are 6 cups of blackberries, otherwise known as 30 ounces. And I've picked them over to make sure there's no funky ones or squished ones, but we looked pretty good. I'm going to mix this together gently with a rubber spatula so I don't squish anybody until these are nicely coated in this sugar cornstarch mixture. All right, this is looking pretty good. So I've got all of the sugar and cornstarch and stuff up off the bottom. You can see that the sugar is already starting to squish up and break down these blackberries. That is fine. The last thing I need to add to this mixture is a tablespoon of lemon juice. And then I'm going to mix this just a little bit more, make sure that lemon juice is nicely distributed. Right. Now that my lemon juice is all mixed in, I'm going to put this in a 9-inch Pyrex pie plate. If you don't have a pie plate or you'd rather not use one, an 8-inch square baking pan will also work. I've got that right here. I'm going to swap this out. Go ahead and add my filling to this pan. Excellent. Then I'm, of course, going to level this out a little bit so it's not all heaped up in the middle. Right. Now this is going to go into the oven at 375 degrees on the lower middle rack, and I'm going to bake it for about 25 minutes. What I want is for the edges to be bubbling and the filling to be heated through. So if your oven tends to run a little hot, you might want to start checking it at 15 or 20 minutes in, just to make sure we don't overcook it too much. It is going to get baked a little bit longer once we get the biscuits on top. So we don't want it fully cooked just yet. I am also going to put it on a baking sheet because if it starts to dribble, I don't want that getting all over the bottom of my oven. While I'm waiting for the filling to finish baking, I'm going to start on our drop biscuits. And I want to do the dry and the wet ingredients separately. So for the dry, I have 1 cup of flour, just regular old all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup of sugar, and then 2 tablespoons of white cornmeal, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon of table salt, which I'll add right in there. And then I'm going to grab my whisk and whisk these together so they're nicely combined and ready for the next step. Okay. I'm going to set that aside. Now for my wet, I have 4 tablespoons of butter, which I've melted in this measuring cup. And to that, I'm going to add 1/3 cup of buttermilk and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, which I've already mixed together. That's what that wonderful coloring is. Set that aside. I'm going to whisk these so that they're just combined. Perfect. Now I'm going to set this aside just like I did with the dry, because I don't want to start mixing the biscuits together until that filling comes out of the oven. If I do it too soon, that dough is going to become a little congealed and funky. Don't want that to happen. So these are going to go over here. And then while I'm waiting, I'm also going to go ahead and put together my cinnamon sugar. And for that, I need 2 teaspoons of sugar. So there's 1, and there's 2. And then 1/8 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. If you like cinnamon, you can definitely do more than that. I'm going to grab my whisk again, whisk these together so they're nice and equally incorporated. And this is what I'm going to dust onto my biscuits once we're at that stage. Now all it's left to do is wait for the filling to come out of the oven. So I will check back in with you in the next 20 minutes or so. Right, our filling has come out of the oven and it looks good. It's just bubbling at the edges and it's nice and hot through, which is what I want. I'm going to leave this on the stove top for a moment while I put together my drop biscuits. Got my dry all mixed up here. Got my buttermilk and my butter and my vanilla, which I will now pour in, making sure I don't leave any behind. And using a rubber spatula, I'm going to fold this together gently, just so it gets nice and combined. This looks like what I want. Nicely combined, no dry patches or anything. I don't want to work this too much because I don't want it to get tough. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring over my filling, and we're actually going to pinch off chunks of this dough and drop them into the filling because they're drop biscuits. I want to have 8 biscuits, about the same size. I'm really bad at it, so we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to space them about 1/2 inch apart so that none of them are touching, because they are going to expand in the oven, and I don't want them to start pushing each other out of the pan. And now I'm going to start taking little chunks of dough and just plopping them down right in there. They don't have to be super formed, so you don't have to like roll them around or anything. Yeah, see what I mean? I've got 7 here, and I still have enough dough for 8 biscuits. So we're just gonna have to make room. Let's see, who should we shift? That's fine. There we go. Now that's all gonna be one big biscuit, but I don't really care. So now I'm gonna get my cinnamon sugar back, and I'm gonna sprinkle it right on top of each of these biscuits, just a little bit for each of them, so that they get nice and cinnamony. I do want to use up all of this cinnamon sugar, so again, I'm doing my best to make sure everything's equally distributed, but we will see if I have to go back and make some adjustments. Okay, here they are. This looks like what I want, except for that edge, but don't look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven, which I have turned up to 425 degrees. It doesn't have to get there now that I'm ready to put this back in, but I do want it to get there eventually. So I do have it heating up, and I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the oven on that baking rack on the lower middle rack, and we're going to let this bake for 15 to 18 minutes. I want the filling to be bubbling all the way through, and I want my biscuits to all be cooked and nicely golden brown on top. So I'll check back in with you once that happens. All right, here she is. She's Cobbler. So this needs to rest for another 20 minutes or so, but it is best served warm, so don't wait too long. If you can resist the urge to eat the whole thing in one sitting, which I'm very bad at, you can heat up individual servings in the microwave a little bit just to get them warmed up again, especially since you should be keeping this in the fridge. Again, the recipe is in the description below. If you have your own fruit dessert recipes that you'd like to share, please post them in the comments below or on the Facebook post for this video. Thank you for joining me. I hope that next time we can meet in person, but if not, I'll be here.